Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Pen. It's a privilege to be here with all of you today. At the International Architecture Biennale, Rotterdam, Urban by Nature, that I curated in 2014, we took stock of the consequences that in this young century, urbanization is identified and addressed as a landscape architectural issue. We positioned the viral growth of urban landscapes in the wider context of the Anthropocene, the age of mankind. The concept of the Anthropocene, as coined by Crutzen in 2000, produces some interesting side effects for our discipline. It underlines the once sought strict boundary between nature and society is crumbling. Human interventions can be seen as and compared with forces of nature. We became aware that anthropogenic processes do not just influence geochemical cycles, biodiversity, sediment flows, ocean acidity, land use, and the climate, but that all these interfering processes produce hybrids. The Anthropocene suggests that human and natural processes are linked in a complex whole that will never return to their initial state, and that there is no natural equilibrium to fall back on, just like we cannot go back to last month's weather. The relentless arrow of time only points forward, and we must find ways of making projects to learn to ride this tiger. The urban landscape is one of the largest of these hybrids. This artifact, formerly known as the city, is our habitat. Most of the world's environmental problems have their roots in the urban landscape. And to solve the current environmental crisis, we must retrofit our urban landscapes by patiently reweaving the extensive urban carpets into more sustainable configurations. We must improve the poorly functioning of these urban regions. For landscape architects, this will involve projects focused on the adaptation to climate change, sweet water supply, energy transition, disaster resilience, defragmenting the ecology, brownfield remediation, etc. And if we want to propel the LAF's declaration of concern another half-century into the future and again claim that our discipline is pivotal to solve these environmental problems, the urban landscapes will both be the subject and the backdrop of our work. Landscape architecture is positioned right to make a contribution. First of all, we might be one of the few disciplines able to construct an interface between the engineering and the life sciences. In this context, the traditional cultural representation of nature upgrades into mediating between nature and society. To my mind, without this vital mediation, we will find no lasting solutions for the problems of urban landscapes. Without it, the toolbox of engineers and urbanists will be limited to half-baked, partial, and hard technical solutions. Furthermore, landscape architecture has a good track record in research through design on complex problems at the landscape scale. In these research trajectories, we learn to work in transdisciplinary teams, where we can act as synthesizers, as generalists with a specific skill, spatial design. In addition to natural sciences and the humanities, design is discovered more and more as a third, separate domain of knowledge production, with its unique combination of modeling, pattern recognition, and synthesis. An appealing and unique element of research through design is that it can elegantly include the concept of free will. It concerns a future that is neither completely determined nor entirely unpredictable, but rather one that has, to some extent, a malleable character. Questions like, what can we want come with this territory? These plans have a new public. They are not aimed exclusively at execution, but more at influencing public opinion. Design can mediate between politics and other actors and citizens. Design could even be instrumental to the shaping of the political will. A recent example of that might very well be the mysterious moving wallpaper you have been watching behind me for the last minutes. It is an animation called 2050, An Energetic Odyssey. We constructed a narrative for the IABR to show how 25,000 wind turbines of 10 megawatt each could gradually occupy the North Sea and by 2050 could provide 90% of the electricity demand of the North Sea countries. Next to all sympathetic bottom-up initiatives, we need scaling up like this to reach the goals as set in the Paris Agreement to keep the rise of the mean world temperature well below 2 degrees centigrade. There seemed to be a spell of defeatism and a crisis of the imagination when it comes to the scale of this energy transition. And research through design can help to overcome it. The Biennale is a free, cultural and relatively safe space where people from very different backgrounds can cooperate and send their policy problems on what we call a sabbatical detour. In the case of the stalemate of offshore wind farms, it produced a snowball effect to inform the design team on the logistics, building speed, marine ecology, technical aspects, financial engineering, etc. All kinds of actors became partners of the project, starting with a large offshore contractor and the Harbour Authority of Rotterdam, soon nature NGOs, the other harbours, energy firms, Dutch ministries, a turbine manufacturer, and finally even Royal Dutch Shell joined and informed the making of this animation. In a way, the production of this animation forged a lasting consortium between the most important stakeholders. Showing the early concepts started a buzz, the word got around, and in the end we were invited to show this giant floor projection on the energy ministers of the 28 European countries during the Dutch presidency of the EU. This week, last Monday, an agreement was signed between the UK, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, France, Denmark, Germany, Belgium and the Netherlands to boost cooperation on turning the North Sea in our central energy landscape. Of course, I know this agreement was not design-driven, but showing the animation and hearing the narrative, all these colleagues of the Dutch minister, it played a modest but significant role according to the press release of our minister. And the consortium is acquiring key players on the other North Sea countries as we speak. Well, this type of work will require a stronger focus on understanding natural and social processes and designing. Sometimes the scale will be almost geographic and raise questions. Is this still landscape architecture? Will landscape architecture preserve its disciplinary coherence with this broad scope and these high levels of scale? Will the absence of real clients in these research through design trajectories loosen the ties with the programmatic precision? Is the connection with the genius of the place lost in the focus on processes? Or is the cultural element so homeopathically diluted that the lifeline to aesthetics or even the discipline itself snaps? I would say the overarching characteristics of all these scales and working fields is that a specific link between program, place and process. If this triad is present, I think we can still safely call it landscape architecture. But maybe we must stop worrying about these definition questions and restrict ourselves to the pragmatic conclusion that landscape architecture is what landscape architects do. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm fully aware that this is a message from the periphery of the discipline. But I am convinced that this periphery will develop into a new center of the discipline. The problems we face gravitates landscape architecture in this direction. New adventures ahead. Thank you.